Wild Review. I'm the Wild Reviewer, and today I'm going to review a thing. Have you ever given a review on something and years later you wonder if what you said still holds up? Well, I have! Hi there, I'm the Wild Reviewer, or at least I was told that's who I am, and this is Rewild, a sequel series to an old review show I used to do called The Wild Review. It ran for 6 seasons from 2015 to 2018, and some of the things that I've talked about, I have different opinions on. Or maybe I don't. That's the whole point of this series. If you are watching this, then that means you are joining me on an adventure as we are going to take a journey into my past to see if what I said in a previous Wild Review episode still holds up. We're gonna make comments about how young I used to look and stupid I used to sound sometimes. It kinda depends on what I was talking about. So, unless you have somewhere else important you need to be, which I highly doubt, seems like you're gonna be taking a journey with me into the past. This is the Wild Review Rewild.
Wild like wild.
I thought the name was cool. Hello, welcome to the Wild Review. I'm the Wild Reviewer. Welcome back to another episode of Rewild, the show where I take a look at some content I've made back in the day, make fun of myself, and then see if what I said still holds up today. Today is a little different. Today we're not necessarily watching a review I did, but a discussion about television. You notice how a lot of properties within the last few years have started to resurface? I mean, just think about all the reboots that we've gotten in the last 5 years, and all the movie remakes, and all the movie reboots, and all the movie sequels that don't necessarily need to be a thing, but we're getting them. In Season 4 of The Wild Review, I made a video discussing the idea of bringing back a television show. This was around the time where a lot of TV shows, both children's shows and regular sitcoms, were getting rebooted or they had sequel spin-offs made to them. Around this time, Fuller House, I think, was really kicking off. I don't think Raven's Home was a thing yet. I think it was in production, but I think it was announced. You can see it obviously continued on to now. We have the iCarly reboot, we have the Blue's Clues reboot, we have even with movies, this is around the time the live-action remakes were really kicking off. Most recently, and specifically around this specific time that this is being filmed, the Pinocchio live-action film hasn't even come out yet. I think it actually comes out in a few days. So I had to ask the question, is bringing back an old television show a good idea? This is actually a really interesting conversation you can have with somebody if they're a TV buff like me. I know I'm not the only TV buff out there. I know a lot of people have their own opinions on whether or not a television show should be brought back. You have those people online that are always like, oh, there should definitely be a Drake and Josh reboot. That was a really good show. But then you have another set of people saying, no, it was a good show, it had a great run, they don't need to bring it back, it's just going to be a cash-in. I'm now realizing that may not actually be a thing that people discuss nowadays. It was just an example. I could have said any other show, like The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Does that need a reboot? No. Whatever the case is, I have some thoughts that may or may not be similar to what I said back then, but let's now dive in and see what exactly I said back then. This is what I had to say when talking about if bringing back a show is a good idea. Here's a question. Is it a good idea to bring back a dead or canceled show? No. Possibly. What? This question popped into my brain around October when I read that Raven-Symoné announced that there will be a That's So Raven sequel series, or a reboot of the whole series. That's So Raven, if you don't know, was a early 2000s Disney Channel show that starred Raven-Symoné, and she had the ability to see into the future. She confirmed that the show is going to be focusing on her character, Raven, as a mother now dealing with a child who also has the same ability. It's actually not surprising that a show that focused on a teenager is coming back years later, and now that teenager is the mom who's dealing with her life as being a mother. That's not the first time a reboot like this has happened. We already have something like Fuller House, which is on Netflix. And it's gonna stay on Netflix, because that's bad. I've seen Fuller House. I don't like it. I never gave Fuller House a full-on review, although by the thumbnail of this video, which was Fuller House, you can argue that I do go into detail of Fuller House, but I never truly gave my thoughts of what I thought about the show, if I thought it was enjoyable, nor have I ever really talked about whether or not I like the original Full House, and this is a little mini review, I guess. Full House, back in the day I liked it. As I got older, it became a little cringy. The other thing is, it's a 90s show. It was a staple of the 90s, so it's going to have those 90 cliches and the cheesiness of those 90s shows. It's kind of like, it's how I feel about Saved by the Bell. Like, the concept is a cool idea, but to really watch it, you have to keep in mind that it was made at a different time, and the way that things are done comes off a little strange nowadays. Like, it's just very corny and cheesy. You also gotta remember that Full House was a hit, and people loved the show, both back then and now. There are probably some people out there today that really love Full House. I'm not one of those people, but I'm sure there's an ultra fan out there. And it was such a hit that it's seen as one of the main examples when talking about a 90s family sitcom. But Full House was a show. It was cute. I don't have a desire to watch it anymore. As for Fuller House, I've only seen the pilot, and I've seen little clips of random episodes here and there. I remember I saw a clip where, what is her name? Not DJ and not Michelle. Mackenzie? Stephanie. The name was Stephanie. So there was an episode where Stephanie got into Uncle Joey's car and backed it into the kitchen. Well, they did that exact same thing in Fuller House. I believe it was the Thanksgiving episode. I haven't seen the full episode, but I've just seen that clip. Also, I've seen clips of the characters looking at the screen whenever Michelle was referenced, because the Olsen twins refused to come back to the show. Well, I wouldn't say refused, they just never showed up. You thought they would show up at some point, but they just never did. Fuller House was essentially the adult version of Full House. I just remembered Bob Saget died this year. Bob Saget was great. He was funny. I got off topic. Why did they bring back Full House? I don't know. Money. There are only two types of shows that would get rebooted. Either a show that got canceled out of nowhere, or a show that has permanently ended. That's true. I've noticed in the past few years that shows that have gotten some form of a reboot have either been shows that have been permanently canceled out of nowhere and the story never continued, or shows that have permanently ended that they've brought back. iCarly is the one that represents the show permanently ending, that they've decided to bring back and age up all the characters. And then as for shows that have been canceled, Hey Arnold comes to mind, but they never really brought back Hey Arnold in the form of a show. They brought it back in a TV movie, which it deserved to have a TV movie because that's how it was always expected to end. If the Amazing World of Gumball movie is still going on, if they're still working on that and the TV show that's supposed to connect with the film, that's a show that's being brought back after the show is permanently ended. I don't know if Gumball's been canceled though. Like, it ended on a cliffhanger, and I don't know if that was the intention or not. But that's always a thing. Those are the only two shows that always seem to get the reboots. And personally, I think if the show gets canceled and doesn't have a formal ending, then yeah, I could see a reboot happening to continue the series. Isn't that what happened with Samurai Jack? I never watched Samurai Jack, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. They brought back Samurai Jack so they can end the story, which I thought was pretty cool. Whatever kind of show you decide to bring back, you need to consider the following things. You need to make sure that the people that were in the show originally are up for coming back and reprising their roles. Whether it's a live-action show or even an animated show, you have to see if the original people that were on board with the show at first are on board for the revived series. Or you don't. You don't necessarily need to do that. I mean, I don't absolutely disagree with that statement. If you can get all the original people that originally worked on the first show on board for the sequel, then go for that. But you can continue a show without the original people. I think Doctor Who is the biggest example of that. It's basically run by fans now, and they know exactly where to go with the show. Kind of. A photo of Chris Chimble somewhere, that's to indicate that he was okay, but the other two were better. Then you have the people that decide to bring back a show that ended perfectly. And this has happened before. Shows have ended perfectly fine, and they were brought back years later for no reason. I mean, there was an obvious reason. It was either because A, people just wanted to make money because the show was very popular, or B, because the fans just loved the show and wanted to see more. The answer is always money. That's why a show comes back. It's always because of money. I mean, they'll say it's because of the fans' love, but how much of that is really true? Most of the time when a show comes back in any form, it's always because of money. It's because it was a hit back then, so they'll think it could be a hit now. Sometimes that may not be the best route, because that also takes away from the originality that people have. I mean, we have so many things that are coming back, whether it's a film or TV show, but what about the original stuff? All these things did start off as an original thing, but if you have so many things that you want to bring back, you're not having any room for the original content now. I'm going to call it now, we're going to get a full house, or fullest Fuller House. You gotta wonder if right now we're living in the age of reboots. You think in like the next 10 years we're gonna get another wave of reboots? Are the reboots that we're getting now gonna get their own reboot at some point? Do you think exactly what happens in Fuller House will happen again if they reboot that and now have those kids from Fuller House to be the parents? It's just gonna be a never-ending cycle then. The same thing could be with iCarly. However iCarly ends, in the next 20 years we'll get a brand new iCarly series where Carly is an adult and has a kid of her own. It's kind of a freaky idea. I remember that nice speech that was made at the end. I think the show ended pretty fine. And then we get this. We get Fuller House, where it focuses on the grown-up children dealing with their kids now. And Bob Saget is rarely in it. Yay! Did that win any awards? It shouldn't have. Did Fuller House even win any awards? Let's find out. So according to Wikipedia, Fuller House has been up for 13 different awards. They have only won 4 of those 13 awards. And most of them appear to just be Teen Choice Awards and Kids' Choice Awards. Sometimes the creators of the show purposely make an end for the show because there's really no more story that they could tell of those characters, of the story plot, of anything regarding that one show. A perfect example would be Gravity Falls. Now, if you're a big fan of the show, you'll probably know that it ended early last year, and the show actually ended a bit quick to all of our surprise. It only had 2 seasons and 41 episodes, but the creator Alex Hirsch said it himself that he felt like that he told as much of the story as he could. He did, however, say that he is open to bringing back the show in maybe like a special or something, which is completely fine, but I don't see him bringing back the show whatsoever regarding a new season or anything. Everybody wanted a season 3 for Gravity Falls just because it was that memorable, funny show that a lot of people liked. But the way that ended in season 2 kind of gave it its own little send-off into the end. So it definitely had a good ending, and I don't really see a need for there to be an extra season. That's not saying that I'm not up for a Gravity Falls special, like maybe a Christmas special or something. That would be pretty interesting. Gravity Falls ended with only 2 seasons. That's kind of the way that Alex Hirsch wanted the show to go, though. If you think about it, it didn't need to continue. Like, we didn't need season 3 to be the next year at Gravity Falls. It'd be very interesting. It'd be cool to see these characters at least one age up, but I feel like what we got is all we needed the show. Not only does it make it an easier watch through, I mean it's only 42 episodes I think, but it doesn't have that many episodes to make it feel like it's just dragging on. Which can be a very big problem for shows that do go on too long, or shows that have reboots that are unnecessary. Sometimes it does feel like you're just stretching the story out, and sometimes when the story has a certain end, it's probably best if it just ends at that point. I hear all the time that people would like a season 3 of Gravity Falls. I read that online. Gravity Falls was a very great show, but I'm very satisfied with how it ended. I don't think it needs a reboot. Of course, I could have said something completely different when I talked about Weirdmageddon, which maybe that's something I should look back at one day. But I'm fine with Gravity Falls only having 2 seasons. It didn't need any more. It told the story it was supposed to tell, and now it's over. we can move on. The main thing that you gotta remember when bringing back a show is that you have to figure out if anyone will in fact watch it. And that depends on how long the show has been off the air. If you have a show that ended in 2001 and want to bring it back to, let's say, now, there's a good chance that you're not going to have the same audience as when you did when the show first aired. That is also a big argument. If you bring something back from, say, the 90s, you have to wonder who will be watching it. The idea of introducing it to a new generation is always going to be there, but will that new generation enjoy it like the kids in the 90s did? Because every generation is different. We kind of got a little of that when they brought All That back, and they had a new cast of kid comedians. Is that how I should phrase them? They had a new set of actors. That's a better way of phrasing it, because these kids being comedians might be giving them a little too much credit. The new season of All That, I believe, only lasted one season. I haven't seen any advertisements for it, and basically everybody who was on the show has moved on to a different Nickelodeon property. I know the one girl is on That Girl Lele, and another girl is on Warped. But that's an interesting question. Will anybody actually watch it? That's something I think every executive wonders. Not even just with a reboot, but just a show in general. Will anybody watch it? You know, what's the age demographic here? What are we throwing this at? Who are we throwing this at? Who are we throwing pebbles at? Obviously, because times have changed and people get older, and sure, you can give the show to a new generation, but you also have a good chance of losing what you originally had that made the show funny or interesting in the first place, and having a bad reputation on that specific part of the series. I may have already touched upon this, that you might lose what you originally had. If you had a great show, you could potentially ruin it by just adding new stuff to it. I don't mean to bring up Doctor Who again, or this topic of the Timeless Child, but I'm still on the fence whether or not the Timeless Child was a great story element or a bad one. Now, of course, this is probably going to go out after Jodie's last episode, and being that I haven't seen the special because it hasn't aired yet, I have no idea if they continue the story or if they wrap up the story element along with her texture in this role. But as of right now, the idea of the Timeless Child is a very iffy idea. Like, it does add something interesting to the character and show, but I'm not sure if it was the best thing to add. And again, Doctor Who is also a reboot, something that I think a lot of us forget. Just one little thing can easily ruin a show or a film. One little story element can just ruin the whole entire thing. That's something to also keep in mind. So to answer the question, is bringing back a dead show a good idea? Possibly. And now, I would like to go over what I think currently of remakes and reboots. It has definitely been a few years since I've made this video. I've seen so many more reboots and remakes come out in the last few years, so do I still agree with myself? A lot of the points that I've made still hold up a little, not every single one of them. The original crew of the iCarly reboot I don't think is part of it. I know it's under new management. Dan Schneider is not part of it whatsoever. So I don't think you technically need everybody who was part of the original to take part in the sequel. It'd be great if you had the original team, if everybody's willing to come back. That way the same energy will be there and there truly won't feel like anything is majorly different. Can go two different ways, honestly. If the property is deserving of a continuation, then I'm fine with that. Like, even though I'm not the biggest fan of this show anymore, like, it's an okay show, but I'm not as hyped about it as I was, if they ever continued Lab Rat's Elite Force, because it did end with a cliffhanger and the story seemed like it was going in a cool direction, I'd give it a watch. I don't know if I'd be the ultimate fan about it anymore because I'm much older than I was, but something like that would deserve a sequel or a continuation because it ended on a cliffhanger. Shows that do end on cliffhangers or with open books, I think, like, sometimes they're deserving of a continuation, but if they were to be continued, then it would be fine. Because if the last story had an uncertain ending or just had a very basic open-ended ending, it would be very easy to follow up with it in any form, and it would work. It would work with whatever story you wanted to tell. If the show had a series finale, though, or it had a perfect ending, that's where I would probably draw the line. If it's got a really great ending, then there's no need to continue it. Sometimes reboots and remakes aren't needed. I think Star Wars is the biggest example of that. Unless it's The Mandalorian, or anything Disney Plus is pumping out, then that's okay. Those are fine. And that's all I really gotta say on this topic. Overall, not too many things are far off from how I think now, but some things are a little different. I want to know what you think, though. What do you think of reboots nowadays? You think we also have too many reboots? Where's room for the original stuff? Give me all your thoughts in the comments below, and also leave me your suggestions for whatever other Wild Review episode I should look back on. I'm willing to look back at any in the future episodes. Also, there's a link to the episode that I looked back at today in the description below, along with a playlist of all the other Rewild episodes. With that said, that's all I have for you today. I'll see you next week when I do the exact same thing, which is sit right here in front of a green screen, watch my old self, and pray to God that I'm not wearing a shirt that is green, and take the chance of me just being a floating head. Thanks again for watching The Wild Review. I'm The Wild Reviewer, and you just saw me review a thing.
Wild like wild.